Hello, this is Jennifer. I'm so glad you're here. I apologize for not having a video for you lately. My son moved into college yesterday and we had a lot to prepare for that, but I have several videos coming to you very soon. Today's video was fun to put together because I have a lot of card examples for you. This video is about taking any kind of backgrounds that you made, like experimenting with techniques or products, and turning them into cards. Some ideas for 2-for-1 cards and other card designs. The backgrounds that I'm using today, or all the different pieces I'm using today, are from a live that I did a few weeks ago. I will link to that live up here in the top right and at the top of my description below. Now that live, I really encourage you to watch. It is longer, however, I stay very focused on the topic of the inks that I'm using. I talk about the inks and I show how to create all of these backgrounds and pieces that you'll see me use today. Now the inks I featured in that video are the Horton Cloud 9 Interference inks. These inks are unbelievably unique. They have some dye and pigment properties to them that cause them to look a different color on a light cardstock than it would on a dark cardstock. So it's almost like two colors in one ink pad. These blend beautifully, and there are many great techniques you can do with them. So in that live, I show how you can use them for blending, with embossing folders, with stencils, with stamps, and much more. So there are tons of techniques in that video, and you can learn more about these inks. Let me show you my ink swatches quickly here. I show all this in the live, but in the ink swatches, you can see I have what one ink pad looks like on white and what it looks like on black. And you can see the two colors are very different between whether it's on a white or a dark color cardstock. Super fun and a lot of shine. Now I know that live is packed with a lot of information on these inks and techniques, but I just thought I would use them briefly here so you can see them in action before we start getting in on our cards. So this is a piece of black cardstock that I used the Gina K Tapestry Embossing Folder on. I'm using a Tim Holtz brayer to roll on some of the Horton Interference ink. This is the Mermaid Lagoon pad. When I put it on black cardstock, it turns purple, and you can see that beautiful metallic interference shine. Now I'm using the same ink pad, but applying it to white cardstock. And notice this gives you like a teal color. Beautiful results on both, very different colors. So I cleaned off my brayer and now I've moved on to the Golden Summer ink pad. When I put this on black, it will end up being like a gold color. It looks a little orangey right now, but as it dries, it gives you a gold look. You'll see in a moment. But then when I use it on the white, it gives me more of like a coral orange color, like a rusty coral color. So you get the two different looks on light or dark cardstock. Now on the black, I'm using Tim Holtz black heavy stock cardstock. It's my favorite black because it is heavyweight, super dark black, and it has like a soft velvety finish to it. So that's why I use that, but you could use any dark color cardstock to get the result that you see on the right. Now I am using a Summer Garden ink pad. When I put this onto the black cardstock, we will get like a teal color look, but then when we put it on white, we get a very green color. So again, you're getting two colors depending on if you apply it on white and black. Now I'm just applying this ink with a brayer on the raised surface of these backgrounds that I used the Gina K Tapestry Embossing Folder on. However, you can use these inks for stenciling, stamping, so much more, and you'll see a lot of those backgrounds and images in this video today. And the final one here is the Lemon Candy, and when I put this on black, it'll end up drying to give us like a coral color, but then when you put it on white, it is a very bright yellow. So it's fun to have this kind of two colors in one pad effect, but really what I like is that the shine is so amazing and that there are so many techniques that you can do. I have some videos coming up where I share more using these inks, but keep in mind today's video is about just taking some inky backgrounds that you've created where maybe you're experimenting with a new ink like I am here, maybe you're experimenting with a technique you've seen in a YouTube video. Oftentimes we'll create backgrounds, but we want to turn those into cards that we can complete and give to our loved ones. So today's video is about taking any kind of inky background that you have and turning it into a card. So to get started, I took that black background and I heat set it to dry those inks, and I trimmed it down and added it to a white note card. So this is very simple, and this is one of the best things you can do with an inky background that you create, is to keep it simple and just use white or neutral cardstocks with it. So to be a little different, I did trim just a little bit off the left, the right, and the bottom, but I lined the top edge up with the top of the note card, and I really like that look. I then used the Poppy Stamps Nordic Floral Butterfly die set to create that layered floral die cut, all from white cardstock with a few gems added. By using layered dies, I can have a lot of interest to it, but I kept it completely white so it doesn't distract from that fun background behind it. So adding very neutral die cuts on top really is a great way to keep the focus on that fun background, and I'll demonstrate that a few times today. By the way, that sentiment is from this Altenew stamp set called Sunny Sentiments. I use this a lot in today's video because I really like the sentiments in it and that there are dies that can coordinate to cut it out. It's an older set, but I use it often. Now, my next card isn't an inky background. It's the only one that really isn't. However, I wanted to show it to you because I demonstrate one of the ink pads that I use a lot later in this video, so I thought it would give you a little more understanding of these inks. Now for this one, I used the really cool Concord and Ninth Mystic Moth Inlay die. This is a great one to do inlay for. You can use this for a lot of occasions, masculine, feminine, whatever you want. And you can see the card that I assembled there over on the right. I'll talk about how I use the inks on that in a moment. But I wanted to show you a particular interference ink from Lisa Horton. This is the Charcoal Gold. When you apply it to white, it has this like charcoal gold look. You can see that kind of charcoal color showing through the gold, especially after you heat set it. So that just shows you what it looks like on white. It's kind of a dark gold color. However, if I use it on black, I get a very gold color. Now, when you put it down at first, it's not bright gold yet, but once you dry it, that charcoal kind of absorbs into the paper, gets hidden, and that gold sits on top and shines through. So look how intense that gold is. Definitely a great gold ink pad to have. She has since come out with a gold metallic ink pad that's fantastic, but this is an interference. So on the white, you can see some of that charcoal showing through. Because I like that gold on the black cardstock, I'm actually going to die cut from that. So I'm die cutting the shadow for the word hello from that black cardstock with the gold ink on top. I did heat set, you want to make sure you do that. This is the Birch Press Big Hello Vintage dies. So the shadow or the background, I did that gold, and then I cut the outline of the hello from black and I glued that together. So you can see that fun gold that's set back in the word hello. Now, the shine on that hello matches the shine that I added on the black parts of those moth wings. So those moth wings I cut from black cardstock, and then I just used a blending tool and a bit of that charcoal gold interference ink pad to put a bit of gold on the tips of those wings. You can see when you tilt this in the light how that adds so much shine to it. I just wanted to share that particular charcoal gold interference ink because I'm going to use it again here in a moment. Now, my next card actually features two pieces that I created in that live that I keep mentioning. One is the background piece and one is that focal point floral image. Now, for the background, you can do this simple design with any inky background. I trimmed it to be narrow and set it offset on a note card. The best part about this is the leftover part that you cut off of that background, you can save for additional cards, and I will show you what to do with thin scraps like that later in this video. But here we have our piece glued onto our note card. Now let me tell you how I created this piece. I used a 3D embossing folder from Simon Says Stamp, and I used that with black Tim Holtz cardstock. I used a brayer to apply the Lisa Horton charcoal gold interference ink on top, that ink that I just showed you, it's the same one, using the technique I showed you earlier in this video. I then trimmed that background down, glued it onto that note card offset, and saved those scraps for a card later on. Now, I also have a piece here that I created using layering stencils. This is created using the Altenew Charming Delight. Now this I did on black cardstock once again, and I used all interference inks on those stencils and look at that shiny color that you get on it. Now, that shine is amazing because it's kind of bold if you tilt it one way and subtle if you tilt it another way. So it's great for a focal point on a card. And I thought these two look nice together. Now let's create the sentiment and look at how that has like a vintage gold look to it. I absolutely love it. For this, I used the Altenew Peony and Lilac Swag stamp set. I've used this before in videos because I really like those sentiments. I chose Sending Hugs in the coordinating die. I'm stamping Sending Hugs with black ink on white cardstock. Then I'll clean off my stamp and stamp it a few times with that same Lisa Horton charcoal gold ink pad. Now, since I'm stamping this ink pad on top of black, it'll give us that gold look. So you could do this with a regular regular gold metallic ink pad. It definitely would give great results. But I really like that this gives a kind of vintage gold look because of that interference ink pad and the properties it has. Now, I always like to heat set these inks and look at that gorgeous result. I love it. I like it even more than heat embossing. Now I'll use the coordinating die on that and add all of this together onto a white note card. Now my white note card is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. However, I left some of the floral image hanging off the edge. I love to do that. So I'm using a bigger envelope with it. This is an A6 envelope, which is a bit bigger than my typical note card size, so I can have things hanging off the edge. I definitely recommend A6 envelopes, and I'll link to what I use below. Now here's a closer look at all of that shine. So we use the interference inks on the background, on that layering image, and on the sentiment. And I used a simple card design here that I like to use often, where I trim an inky background down, offset it, and then I'll have the leftover pieces that I can use on a card later on. So very simple here, not much to it, but I think when you create something that is really inky and beautiful and a lot to look at, it's good to keep the card pretty simple. All right, let's move on to some more cards. The best part about these upcoming cards is they are 2-for-1 cards. I'll take one inky background and trim it in such a way that I can use it on 2 cards, keeping that background in focus. And I have a few examples for you. Now let's get started with this one. First, I want to do the note card itself. You see that white background on the note card? I used a background die to do a white on white background just to add some interest to it. For this, I used the Poppy Stamps Nordic Lacy plate die, and I cut that from white cardstock. This die has quickly become one of my favorites because it cuts holes and does detail piercing, creates a beautiful background. I cut it from white and I'm gluing it onto white note card. And the reason I'm doing that is it just adds a tiny bit of interest and a tiny bit of texture. I don't want much here because I'm going to put my inky background on it and I want that to be more in focus. But by doing this, you can have just a little something special on the background. I like layering different patterns together. You could also use an embossing folder here or leave it plain if you wanted to. Another way to create subtle texture would be to white heat emboss a background image on the white cardstock. That will give that white on white textured look also. Now while this dries, I'll put a heavy weight on it and also 2 magnets. I work on a glass work surface that is magnetic. So I've got these magnets that'll hold things in place as they dry. By the way, I have a 20% off discount code for those in my description below if you're interested. So now I've got this very subtle background that I can add my inky background to. Now, one of my favorite go-to designs is to put one of my inky backgrounds, sorry I keep calling it that, at a bit of an angle on the left side. It just creates a little interest to have that element at an angle. So I'm putting glue on my background towards that top left corner and then towards the bottom right corner of my background. I'll place this down and press it down. Now this background is trimmed to be, I think it's about 5.5 by 5.5 inches. I created that background in that live that I mentioned. I'm going to trim off the excess by flipping it over, and I'll just trim around it using my favorite long scissors. These are the Spellbinder shears. They are amazing. So it's easy to cut right along the edge of the note card. So now I have this background for this card, and I'll save the rest of this for another card that I'll show you in a moment. I'll finish the card on the left first. Since it has that white texture on the background and all that shine on our inky background, I'm going to keep the rest of it very simple. I've cut a thin scrap of gold metallic cardstock that I'm gluing right along the bottom edge for a finished look. And then I'm placing a sentiment using that Altenew stamp set right along that border. That will kind of draw the attention to it. While that dries, I'll work on my second card. This uses that leftover inky background piece. I trimmed it into two, so I have a border on my card, and then this little piece I will die cut the Memory Box Silver Moon butterfly dies from, so I can have a little butterfly that will match the border on my card. So let's look at the completed second card first. You can see that inky background with all that metallic shine on the left-hand side, and I left the white note card plain on this one. I added a large sentiment using the Altenew Timeless Sentiment 2 die set. I love that Have a Good Day sentiment. And then I added the little butterfly that I made with my leftover scrap. So this was a very simple design. It allows a lot of that background to show, and I was able to get 2 cards for 1. These designs could be done with any inky background you create. So next time you maybe experiment with alcohol inks and you have some backgrounds and you don't know what to do with them, try these designs. Now here's the first one. I left this very simple also so that the background really shines. I used the butterfly die to create a white butterfly, and that provides some contrast. So here I have a white butterfly on the inky background. On my last card, I have an inky background butterfly on white. So it gives that little bit of contrast and makes everything stand out. By the way, a lot of the envelopes I used today are Simon Says Stamp and metallic envelopes. These have a shimmer to it that really go nicely with the shimmer you get from these interference inks. Now I liked this kind of 2-for-1 idea so much I have another pair, but the second card's a little different. Here's the first card. It looks like the last one we did, but I used a different inky background. Now this background I created with the exact same stamps and inks as I did the last card. You can see the color palette's completely different thanks to those interference inks. The last card had black cardstock. This one has white, so the inks look completely different on them. Now with this one, I did a little gold butterfly and some like dark gold little gemstones. The sentiment for that one is from the Altenew Delightful Days stamp set. I use this one a lot because I think that sentiment can be used for a lot of occasions. Now for my second card, I used the leftover pieces from that inky background, but I matched it up with another inky background. So we have 2 that go together and meet at the middle at an angle. Now, what I could have done here, and I didn't think of it at the time, was cut this into 2 pieces and then just glue them together on the note card meeting in the middle. I didn't think of that at the time, not sure why. So I'm actually gluing my leftover piece from the last card on top of this other inky background. Should have cut it up, but that's okay. Now I have a panel that is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. And to kind of distinguish between the 2 patterns, I'm going to put a scrap strip along it. You could either use white or gold. I ended up going with gold. So you can see how I quickly created a really interesting background. And all I have to do is add a simple sentiment and embellishments to it. So I trimmed down the background slightly and I added it to a white note card that is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. I also used that Altenew Timeless Sentiments 2 die set again to create the Have a Good Day sentiment with white and gold cardstock, and I added a gold butterfly. That's all that's added on there because there's so much interest to the background. So this is another design that you can use using inky backgrounds that you create as you explore different techniques. Next, I have another 2-for-1 pair, and this one's simple. The whole idea here is to take one inky background, cut it in 2 panels to use on 2 cards. But I also demonstrate more of the idea of using white layered die cuts together on a bold background, so it's not too distracting. Here I'm using the incredible new Gladiola die set from Memory Box. Look at what you can do with colored cardstock, the little example I put over there on the right. However, I cut all of the pieces from white cardstock. Now, if you go to their website, they have an easy to follow layering guide, so I'm just gluing these little die cuts together to create beautiful gladiolas. Now, I'm doing this all from white cardstock because I like to use something in contrast, in high contrast, to whatever my inky background is. Since I have kind of a darker inky background, I'm going with white cardstock. If I had a lighter inky background, I would use black. Another option would be to use gold or glitter papers or silver. You just want something that isn't going to distract you from what you created on your background. Now on the other card, I'm using the Memory Box Blue River Butterfly die set, and that's another layering one, and I did everything from white cardstock. Now the background started as 5.5 by 5.5, my inky background. I trimmed it in half and trimmed it a little bit shorter, and I'm adding them onto white note cards. On one of them, I'm gluing that inky panel right down the center, but lined up at the top. And on this one here, I'm doing it a little offset to the left. You may notice a bit of texture on those white note cards. I use the Concord 9th Stitch Polka Dot die. That's a large background die that just does pierced circles, so that adds that texturing detail. This type of texture is a great way to add a little interest to a simple card design. Now in this particular one here, I'm adding a Hello die cut. This was created with the Memory Box Hello Breezy script die set. I cut the shadow from white, the word hello from gold, and added that onto our card. You could add some embellishments to this, but I left it as is. So here is the first card. You can better see the dot circles in the background now, and you can see that interference shine that we get from that inky background that I created in that previous live. I have the layered white die cuts that add interest but don't distract from the background, and a very simple sentiment. Then we have our second card that was made with the same background that I had just cut in half. And I even have a little strip left over that I'll use on my last card. Now on this one, I used a foiled sentiment, and this is left over from a video that I did a couple weeks ago. I will link to that up here on the top right if you want to see how easy it is to create that foiled sentiment strip. Again, we have the circle dot detail in the background that just adds some fun. And once again, I matched it up with a metallic envelope to match that shine. All right, let's move on to our next example. This one features an inky background, but I'm using some specialty cardstocks with it and keeping the design simple. The specialty cardstock I'm using today is from Tim Holtz. It's his metallic craft cardstock. I love this pad because it has lots of silver and gold cardstock in it that has like a kind of weathered look to it, and the backside is craft. I actually don't think weathered is the right word, so I'll do a comparison here. I have the Tim Holtz Gold here on the left. On the right, I have a traditional gold matte cardstock, and you can see the shine is different. It's a little more subtle. I love it. I'm also using the metallic Confections craft cardstock. This is again shiny with the craft on the other side, but look at all the different colors here. This is more of a solid shine, not as much of a weathered look. But what I like about it is that they're muted. They're not like super vibrant colors. He does have a Jewels pad too, I believe it's called, but I'm using this one today. I also have an inky background left over from that live. You can see I did the interference ink stamped on black cardstock. I trimmed that down to be 4.25 by 5.5 inches, and I'm saving those leftover scraps for my last card in this video. I am now cutting a mat for this from that Tim Holtz gold metallic cardstock. And you can see it's just a little bit of that gold peeking around the edge. Now what you could do is die cut from the center of that gold so it doesn't go to waste, and then glue your inky panel on top. I didn't think of that at the time, but I wanted to throw that idea out there. So I'm gluing these together, and then I'll glue them onto a card, but I'm doing it at a little bit of a tilt. Just a little cattywampus, just to kind of change up the card design a bit. This is another easy thing you can do with inky backgrounds. So I'm gluing that onto my 4.25 by 5.5 inch top folding white note card. Then I can flip it over and trim off those little corners. Now while that dries, I'll show you my sentiment. I use the Simon Says stamp, Proud to Be Your dies. So you can see the die set in my hand. You can create Proud to Be Your Friend or Proud to Be Your Family. And then there is a shadow die included for both options. So I did Proud to Be Your Friend. I cut those letters from the Tim Holtz gold metallic cardstock so it'll match the mat that's around the inky background. I then added that onto a white shadow die cut. This will keep the card very simple, putting my sentiment right there in the center. And then I will add a simple purple heart that I cut from the colorful shiny cardstock pack from Tim Holtz. So just as a little pop of purple at the center there to match the purple interference ink that I have on the background. So again, it's a very simple card design that allows our inky background to really show, but we changed it up and added a little interest by putting the background at a bit of a tilt. And then we use some specialty cardstocks for the sentiment so that it stands out also. All right, let's move on to another card. Super simple. I took one of my inky backgrounds from that live. This one's my favorite because it looks like a galaxy. And I added a sentiment in the center using specialty cardstock. This is the Simon Says stamp, I think the world of you, which I think is a great sentiment. I like that it's large, so it really fills the card nicely, but you still have a lot of that background showing. I use gold glitter cardstock for the words themselves, so it would match all the gold that I have in the background. I also added some gold iridescent stars to really pull out that interference look that I got from the inks. So you don't have to do anything fancy with your inky backgrounds. Just add a nice bold sentiment in the center and a couple little embellishments and you're good to go. Ironically, this is the simplest of all the cards and it's my favorite. And to demonstrate that you don't have to do much when you have a fun inky background, here is another example. This one I created in the live where I did some ink smooshing with the interference inks and water. I use the Simon Says stamp, You Brighten My Day sentiment towards the top center. And that, again, is another good one to fill nicely at the center of a card. This time, I used all white cardstock, except for the words, I used a white glitter cardstock. That is from the Altenew Milky Way glitter paper pack. It has like whites, silvers, and blacks in it, and I really like that white. It has a lot of sparkle in real life, but no color to it. So it really is nice to use on an inky background like this so that that shines. Now here's another one that I did this time using the Simon Says stamp lined Love You Dies. I've always liked this one. I used white for the shadow, and then I used that purple metallic cardstock for Tim Holtz for the Love You. The little sentiment on there is foiled, and that is again from the foiling video that I did a few weeks ago, and it's linked up here on the top right. It's hard to see the shine in the background on this one, but it's absolutely beautiful. I have one more random card to show you, and then I'll show you the one I made with all the scraps. Now this one, I used my inky background from a video. I didn't love the inky background alone, and so an idea to do with an inky background that you don't love is to add something on top of it, so just a bit of it shows through. I'm using a Simon Says stamp background die, and it has these fun little windows. So I thought this would look neat, die cut and added on top of our background so the shine just shows through those little windows. I cut this twice from black cardstock and glued it together, and I added that on top, but then I decided I wanted like a navy cardstock. So I used Lawn Fawn Blue Jay cardstock, which is one of my favorite colors, and look how that bit of color on the background pulls together with the inky bits showing through, and you have a very simple card design. I added a Take Care sentiment from a Concord and 9th die set that I use in so many videos, and I also added some black gemstones to the background. So this took very little time to pull together and is a great option when you're not so sure you love the whole background, but you still want to put it to good use. All right, now it's time for the card I've mentioned many times throughout this video, and this is the one where I use lots of the thin strips of my inky backgrounds together. Now I don't use them all, I just used a few on this card, but I have some more left over so I can make similar cards. I'm starting with a white note card, and I've already glued a white die cut to it using that Lacy Nordic background die that I used several times in this video. I also have these little strips that I'm going to have come down from the top corner of the note card, and these strips are left over from all the cards I did in this video. What I like to do is cut a little V at the bottom of them. You can also just cut them at an angle if you want to. The way I like to cut a little V at the end of a strip is to do a small cut at the bottom center. So I'm doing a small little cut here at the bottom center. Then I will cut from the corner to the end of the cut at the center, and then the other corner to the end of the cut at the center. And this gives us a nice V edge. There are other ways to do this, but I find this to be the easiest and fastest. Now, I like to put foam tape on some of the strips, but not all of them, so you have varying degrees of dimension. And I'm just adding these to the top left. You could have them coming out the bottom right corner, whatever you want. And I'll just stagger them randomly. You could put just 3, but I ended up putting more onto it, using thinner strips, layering together and tucking behind the ones I already have. I even used a thin strip of that gold metallic cardstock from Tim Holtz that kind of draws your attention right there to where the butterfly and sentiment are. So the butterfly I created with that gold metallic cardstock from Tim, and I again used an Altenew stamp sentiment kind of offset over to the right. So this design could be changed up in several ways to use scraps from any of your inky backgrounds so none of it goes to waste. Always save those little strips. So here we have a bunch of cards I was able to make on this afternoon using all of the inky backgrounds and pieces I made in that previous live. I hope you liked watching me turn these into cards. Many of you wanted to see what I did with them. So here it is. Sorry, it took me a while to get it all pulled together. If you're interested in that live video or any of the supplies that I used today, I have them linked below in my YouTube description. I also will link here at the end to that live and another related video. I thank you for spending this time with me. If you don't mind it, please give it a thumbs up if you've enjoyed it so YouTube knows to share my video with others. Thanks so much. Have a great day. We'll see you soon.